She was my boss, sharp, composed, untouchable. Yet in the quiet hours, when the office emptied and her guards slipped, I caught glimpses of the woman behind the title. Every stolen glance, every brush of her hand, pulled me closer to a line neither of us dared cross. Until one night she whispered, "We could get caught." And all I could say was, "That's the thrill." I had always thought of her first as my boss, composed, sharp, the kind of woman who could silence a crowded meeting room with a single glance. At 43, she carried authority like it was woven into the fabric of her being. Everything about her presence was measured, the way she crossed her arms while listening, the calm rhythm of her voice when settling disputes, the subtle lift of her chin that reminded you she wasn't someone to be underestimated. But over time, in the quiet moments when no one else was watching, I began to notice things that didn't fit the image of flawless control she projected. The sigh she let slip when she thought she was alone. The way her fingers sometimes lingered on the edge of her coffee cup as if grounding herself. The gentle softness in her eyes whenever she looked out the window longer than necessary. It was strange, how respect slowly gave way to something warmer, something heavier. I told myself it was nothing. Admiration, maybe? Curiosity. But there were moments that seemed to hold me still, like when she reached across the table one afternoon, passing me a folder. Our fingers brushed, not by accident, I knew, but neither of us let go immediately. Her skin was warm, delicate in contrast to the crisp edges of the file. My pulse spiked, though I kept my face steady. She only smiled faintly, almost like she had caught me off guard on purpose, then turned back to her work, as if nothing had happened. And that smile, professional, yes, but touched with something gentler, stayed with me long after. The truth is, I noticed everything about her. The slight shift in her shoulders when she was tired, the way she adjusted her glasses with the tip of her finger, the way her perfume lingered in the hall even after she'd gone. I couldn't help it. Once the thought of her as just a boss slipped, it was impossible not to see her as a woman, with all her quiet strengths and private vulnerabilities. There was one afternoon in particular that marked the shift. She was standing at the window, sunlight spilling across her desk, painting her hair with copper and gold. She looked tired in a way I wasn't used to seeing. Without thinking, I asked if she was all right. For a fraction of a second, her expression softened, and she looked at me not as her employee but as a man who had noticed. That single glance, unguarded, almost grateful, was the moment something invisible passed between us. It was fragile, like the space before a storm, but it was real. From then on, every interaction seemed to carry an undercurrent neither of us dared name. I told myself to stay professional, to respect boundaries. She was older, wiser, and far above me in every sense. Yet the pull was undeniable, like a quiet current drawing me closer with every passing day. I didn't know it then, but that subtle brush of her hand, that fleeting glance, was the beginning of something neither of us would be able to ignore. The office felt different after everyone else had gone home. The hum of chatter, phones, and printers faded until only the quiet rhythm of our keyboards remained. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed softly, and outside the tall windows, the city was settling into its evening glow. I hadn't meant to stay late, but deadlines had a way of pulling me deeper into the screen than I realized. When I finally looked up, I was surprised to see her still there, sitting at her desk across the room. She leaned forward slightly, glasses perched low on her nose, her pen moving in steady strokes across a contract. "Still here?" she asked without looking up. "Same as you," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Guess we're both too stubborn to quit when we should." That made her smile, just a little. The kind of smile that flickered before she pushed it away, like she didn't want me to notice. After a while, she stood and walked toward the small office kitchen. The click of her heels echoed in the silence, each step measured but softer than usual. She returned with 2 mugs of coffee, steam curling into the air. Setting one on my desk, she said simply, "You look like you need it." Our fingers brushed as I reached for the mug. It was the second time it had happened, but in the stillness of the empty office, it felt louder somehow, as though the walls themselves noticed. Her hand lingered an instant longer than necessary, and my grip faltered just enough to betray the jolt that went through me. "Thanks," I murmured. My voice sounded rougher than I intended. She only nodded and returned to her desk, but her presence felt different now. Closer, even across the room. The hours stretched on, both of us bent over our work, but the silence between us wasn't empty. It was filled with the scrape of her pen, the faint clink of her ring against her coffee mug, the quiet sighs she let slip when she was deep in thought. I became attuned to every small sound she made, as if they were meant only for me. At one point, I made a joke about the spreadsheet I was wrestling with. It wasn't particularly clever, but she laughed softly, a laugh that didn't belong in a boardroom. It was lighter, warmer, almost musical. I found myself grinning like an idiot just to have coaxed it out of her. When the clock finally crept past 10, she leaned back in her chair and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "We're going to regret this tomorrow," she said. "Probably," I admitted. "But I don't mind." She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes tired but gentle, and for a moment the weight of age, titles, and roles seemed to fall away. She was simply a woman, weary yet beautiful in the half-light, sharing a quiet moment with someone who saw her. I sipped the last of the coffee, now lukewarm, but the warmth between us lingered. Something unspoken had begun to bloom in the quiet hours of that night, and though neither of us named it, we both felt it. The following week was busier than usual. Reports were stacking up, meetings were endless, and everyone seemed to be chasing deadlines. In the middle of that storm, she called me into her office to go over a client proposal. Her office had always intimidated me. Not because of its size, though it was larger than mine, but because it was hers. Every corner carried her touch, framed certificates, a single vase of fresh flowers, the faint trace of her perfume that seemed woven into the air itself. I sat across from her, laptop open, while she leaned over to scan the draft I'd been working on. At first, it was routine, her calm voice, my quiet explanations, the rustle of paper between us. But then she stood, moving around her desk to sit beside me so we could look at the screen together. It was such a small thing. Logical, even. But the shift in space changed everything. She sat close enough that I felt the faint warmth radiating from her. Her shoulder brushed mine as she leaned in, pointing to a line of text with her pen. I tried to focus on the document, but all I could register was how near she was, the clean scent of her perfume, the soft fall of her hair as it slipped across her cheek. "See here?" she murmured, her voice low, almost intimate. I turned my head at the same moment she did, and suddenly our faces were inches apart. Her eyes met mine, steady, searching, unguarded. The kind of gaze that didn't belong to a boss and an employee, but to two people caught in a moment they weren't supposed to share. For a heartbeat, I didn't breathe. My pulse thudded in my ears, and the air between us felt charged, fragile. If I leaned even slightly forward, I could close the space. If she tilted her head, everything would change. She must have felt it too, because her breath caught. I saw her lips part, as if she might say something, or maybe as if she almost wanted me to. But then, just as quickly, she drew back. The chair squeaked softly as she leaned away, clearing her throat and adjusting her glasses. "That's the section we need to revise," she said, her tone suddenly brisk, professional again. The moment shattered, but the echo of it remained. I forced myself to nod, pretending to refocus on the words on the screen. Yet my hands trembled slightly on the keyboard, and I was sure she noticed. We worked in silence after that, but it wasn't the easy quiet of before. It was tense, heavy, like both of us were trying to pretend nothing had almost happened. When the meeting ended, she stood quickly, gathering her papers as though to put distance between us. I rose too, pausing at the door. For the briefest second, I looked back. She was watching me, not with authority, not with dismissal, but with something softer, conflicted. Something she couldn't admit. I left her office, but the moment clung to me. That single glance, that near crossing of the line, had changed everything. The client dinner ended later than expected. Most of the team headed off in a loud cluster toward the main road, calling cabs and laughing off the wine that had flowed too freely. She and I lingered at the edge of the group, walking side by side as the night air cooled the warmth in our cheeks. The city was alive, streetlights glowing in long stretches, cars sliding by with flashes of color, the occasional hum of conversation drifting from late-night cafes. But around us, it felt quieter. The space between our steps carried a tension that neither of us was naming, but both of us felt. She walked with her hands clasped lightly in front of her, her posture relaxed but her expression thoughtful. After a while, she glanced at me and said, almost playfully, "You're not like the others on the team." "How so?" I asked, shoving my hands into my pockets to hide the nervous energy buzzing in them. "You listen," she replied. "Most people just wait for their turn to speak. But you notice things. It makes me forget how much younger you are." Her words sent a ripple through me. She said them lightly, almost as if she wished she hadn't, but they landed with weight. I slowed my steps without realizing it, and she matched my pace, the group ahead of us drifting farther until we were half a block behind. "You don't have to carry everything all the time," I said softly, surprising even myself. She looked at me sharply, as if I had tugged on a thread she kept carefully hidden. For a second she didn't speak, her eyes fixed ahead. Then, in a voice quieter than the city around us, she admitted, "Sometimes it feels like I do." The vulnerability in her words tightened something in my chest. I wanted to reach out, to take some of that weight from her shoulders, but I kept my hands at my sides. Instead, I let my shoulder brush against hers as we walked, a small touch, casual enough to be dismissed, but deliberate enough to say I'm here. She didn't move away. A stray lock of her hair slipped free, stirred by the breeze, brushing against the back of my hand. I could have pulled away. I could have pretended not to notice. But I didn't. And she didn't move it either. That single strand lay like a thread binding us together in a silence neither of us dared break. We reached a corner where the group ahead turned off toward the taxis. She stopped, glancing back at them, then at me. For a heartbeat, the city around us blurred, traffic lights, neon signs, voices in the distance, and there was only her. Her lips parted as though she might say something, then closed again. Instead, she gave me a look I couldn't mistake, a look caught between hesitation and desire, restraint and surrender. We didn't speak of it. Not yet. But I knew, and she knew, that the line we'd almost crossed in her office was no longer behind us. It was right here, following us in every step we took together. The office was nearly empty again, the kind of quiet that pressed against the walls and made every sound sharper than usual. I was at my desk, finishing up a report, when I noticed her light still glowing beneath her door. Most of the building had gone dark, but her office stood like a lantern in the distance. I hesitated before knocking. Part of me wanted to leave things as they were, to keep our balance steady. But the other part, the louder part, was drawn to her presence, to the magnetic pull that had been building for weeks. "Come in," she said when I tapped lightly. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, as if she'd been deep in thought. She sat behind her desk, papers spread out in neat stacks. The desk lamp cast a warm circle of light, softening her features. She looked tired but striking, hair falling a little loose, glasses set aside, her fingers resting on the rim of her coffee cup as though she needed the anchor. "You're still here," I said. "So are you." Her eyes lifted to mine, lingering longer than they should have. "What excuse do you have? Maybe I was hoping you'd still be here," I admitted before I could stop myself. The silence that followed was heavy, charged. She leaned back in her chair, studying me with a look that wasn't just professional anymore. It was searching, conflicted, vulnerable. I crossed the room, setting the file I carried on her desk. The distance between us felt unbearable, like the air itself was holding its breath. I rested my hand lightly on the desk beside hers, not touching, not quite, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. She glanced down at the space between our hands, then back up at me. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. "We could get caught." Her words weren't teasing. They were heavy with meaning, laced with fear and responsibility. She was reminding me of the line, of the risks. The difference in age. The workplace. The reputation she had built. I should have stepped back. I should have laughed it off. But instead, I met her gaze steadily and replied, "That's the thrill." Her lips parted slightly, her breath unsteady. For a moment, she didn't move. Her eyes searched mine as if weighing whether I understood the gravity of what I was saying, and whether she dared let herself believe me. The silence stretched, fragile as glass. She could have broken it easily, ended everything with a single word. But she didn't. Instead, she stayed there, her hands still on the desk, her eyes flickering between my face and the space between us. Her restraint was crumbling. https://chat.com/c/6AD6A3B7AEDCA327B742AB47B#colon. Text equals first %20 embrace %20, expanded, dash. She %20 didn't %E2 %80 %90 90 %20 step %20 away. %20 that %20 was %20 what %20 struck %20 me %20 most. %20 after, lingered %20 between %20 us %2 c %20 neither %20 of %20 us %20 was %20 ready %20 to %20 step %20 away. Comma would %20 you %20 like when she finally stepped back. The weight of what had just happened lingered in the air, like smoke after a candle had been snuffed out. My arms still felt the imprint of her body, the warmth where she had leaned into me. She returned to her desk slowly, not with the sharp authority I was used to, but with a kind of hesitation, as though she wasn't quite sure how to wear her composure anymore. I remained where I was, leaning lightly against the edge of her desk, unwilling to let the moment dissolve into silence. "You don't have to take it back," I said quietly. Her eyes flickered up to mine. "What if I should?" "You don't want to." She let out a small laugh, but it wasn't amusement, it was weary, self-protective. She sank into her chair and pressed her fingertips to her temple. "You don't understand. I've built my whole life on being careful. Careful with my choices, my image, my responsibilities. One mistake could undo it all." I moved closer, crouching slightly so I could meet her eyes from where she sat today. "Then maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe it's just something real. Something you're allowed to have." Her gaze softened, though her lips pressed together, as if she were still fighting herself. Slowly, tentatively, I reached for her hand where it rested on the arm of the chair. This time I didn't brush against her or hover in hesitation. I let my fingers cover hers, warm and steady, and waited for her to pull away. She didn't. Instead, her thumb shifted just enough to trace a line along my knuckles. It was such a small gesture, but it held more tenderness than any words could. "You make it sound simple," she murmured. "Maybe it is," I said. "The thrill isn't about breaking rules or hiding. It's about you. About being here with you, even if the world doesn't understand." Her breath caught, her eyes searching mine as if weighing the truth in my words. For the first time since this all began, she let her guard drop completely. No professional mask, no cautious distance. Just her, tired, human, but still achingly beautiful. "You make me feel seen," she admitted, her voice low. "Not as a boss, not as someone who has to keep everything together. Just me." I squeezed her hand gently, anchoring her to the moment. "That's all I've ever wanted." For a long while, we stayed like that, our hands entwined on the desk, the quiet humming around us like a fragile cocoon. There was no rush, no urgency. Just a steady calm, as if both of us had decided, wordlessly, to stop running from whatever this was. Finally, she stood again, slower this time, and stepped close. Not hesitant now, but sure. She leaned in just enough that I felt the soft brush of her cheek against mine. A kiss would have been too much, too soon, but the warmth of that gesture was more intimate than any embrace. "We'll figure it out," she whispered. And with our hands still clasped, I believed her. For the first time, it didn't feel like we were standing at the edge of a line we couldn't cross. It felt like we had chosen, together, to walk across it. and I could feel it. Finally, she pushed back her chair and stood. Not to leave, but to step closer. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence, close enough that the air between us trembled with possibility. She didn't touch me. Not yet. But the warning had been spoken, and the choice had been made. Whatever came next, we were already past the point of pretending.